All right. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be moving on and talking about the idea of the multiplier. This idea that spending in an economy is going to lead to more spending, and that's going to help grow aggregate demand in an economy. So, for example, let's say that the US government decides to spend $1 million. The multiplier would say that not only would aggregate demand go up $1 million, but it would go up, in addition to that, a multiplier of that $1 million. So aggregate demand would actually go up more than the amount that the government spent. So that's the idea behind the multiplier. And before we get into the multiplier, however, we need to go ahead and review over marginal propensity to consume and save. So let's get into that. So let's start off by talking about disposable income. So another name for disposable income is net income. It's what you net after taxes. It's your take-home pay, the amount that you have to spend after taxes. It is also known as your after-tax income. Now, marginal propensity to consume, MPC. We've already talked about this a little bit. It's the fraction of any change in disposable income that is consumed. So your marginal propensity to consume is going to be your change in consumption over your change in disposable income. And remember, since we're looking at the margin, that change in disposable income is going to be $1. So we're looking at of every $1 earned, how much of that is consumed. So your marginal propensity to consume is going to be your change in consumption over your change in disposable income. Remember that change in disposable income is $1 since we're focusing on the margin. Now, marginal propensity to save is the fraction of any change in disposable income that is saved or not spent. So your marginal propensity to save is going to be your change in savings over your change in disposable income. Remember, since we're looking at the margin here, that change in disposable income is going to be $1. So your NPS is going to be change in savings over change in disposable income. Quick review over a few equations here. MPC plus your MPS is always going to be equal to 1. Remember, MPC and MPS generally are expressed as decimals. So of every dollar, there's going to be a percentage that's consumed and a percentage that is saved. If you put those in decimals, add them together, you're going to go ahead and get to 1. So this implies, so that those three little dots there means implies, your MPC is equal to 1 minus the MPS. That's just a little manipulation of the top equation. And your MPS is going to be equal to 1 minus your NPC. And always remember that people do two things with their disposable income. They're either going to consume it or they're going to save it. So one of the key things here is that once you know the MPC or MPS, it's fairly easy mathematically to calculate the other one. So for example, if your MPC is 0.1, your MPS is going to be 0.9. 0.1 plus 0.9 is equal to 1. If your MPS is 0.8, your MPC is going to be 0.2. 0.8 plus 0.2 is 1. Your MPC is 0.3, your MPS is going to be 0.7. 0.3 plus 0.7 is equal to 1. So that NPC plus NPS is equal to 1 is a very key equation to remember. All right, so let's move on here and talk about the multiplier. So the spending multiplier effect is an initial change in spending that would come from consumption, gross private investment, government spending, and net exports that causes a larger change in aggregate spending or aggregate demand or real GDP. Okay, so we have this initial change in spending and that causes the larger change in aggregate demand or real gross domestic product. So your multiplier is going to be your change in aggregate demand or real GDP over your change in spending. Or your multiplier is equal to change in aggregate demand or real GDP over your change in consumption, gross private investment, government spending, net exports. So we're looking at how a change in consumption, gross private investment, government spending, and exports, and what kind of effect it has on aggregate demand and thus real gross domestic product. All right, so why does the multiplier happen? Expenditures and income flow continuously, which sets off a spending increase in the economy. Basically, spending is going to be leading to more spending. Let me give you an example. So let's say the government increases defense spending by $1 billion. What's going to happen is that's going to provide money to defense contractors. They're going to hire and pay more workers. Those workers are going to start buying things. And so ultimately what's going to happen, aggregate demand is going to go up more than the original $1 billion spent by the government. You have a multiplier in terms of the amount of aggregate demand that came from that government spending. Let's say Mr. Vanderpool gets work done on his car, $1,000 worth of work done on his car. So that's an increase in consumption. And the mechanics, therefore, have more money to spend. So they spend money. And that increases aggregate demand by even more than the $1,000 that Mr. Vanderpool spent on the car. So $1,000 worth of consumption from Mr. Vanderpool, because that was a payment for a service, expanded aggregate demand by more than that $1,000 because the mechanics then have money to spend, and so on and so forth. So the idea behind this multiplier is it's kind of this virtuous cycle of spending where some spending sets off more spending. Spending leads to more spending is the fundamental idea behind the multiplier. Now, let's get into some equations regarding calculating the spending multiplier. So the spending multiplier can be calculated from the marginal propensity to consume or the marginal propensity to save. Now, the spending multiplier is calculated as 1 over 1 minus NPC, or, as more commonly expressed, 1 over the marginal propensity to save. And that is what I would memorize, okay? Your spending multiplier is going to be 1 over the marginal propensity to save in an economy. So multipliers are positive when there's an increase in spending and negative when there is a decrease in spending. So as society consumes more, the multiplier is going to go up. As the society saves more, the multiplier will go down. Now, another type of multiplier that exists is called the tax multiplier, and we're going to talk about that right now. So when the government taxes, the multiplier is going to work in reverse. Why? Because money is going to be leaving the circular flow. When the government taxes people, it takes money out of the economy, so people have less money to spend. So the tax multiplier, it's going to be negative because you're taxing people, you're removing money from the circular flow. So it's negative NPC over 1 minus NPC, or as more commonly put, negative NPC over MPS. So that is what I would memorize, is the tax multiplier is negative NPC over NPS. Now, if there is a tax cut, The multiplier is going to be positive because now there's more money in people's pockets to go ahead and spend. There's more money in the circular flow. So therefore, a tax cut, the multiplier is going to be NPC over NPS. It's going to be positive. All right, so next video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at some scenarios here.